Okay, so once again, welcome everybody to today's reporting session. It's been a while since our committee brought everybody together to talk about things, and there's been some activity, everything progressing in what I would consider to be a positive fashion regarding the standards work of this committee. So today is being done to bring everybody up to speed on things and to allow time for some feedback, questions, input, and things like that. So before we begin today's meeting, I wanted to go through the agenda. I did put this into the meeting announcement today, but we'll lead off by going into the IPC antitrust statement. We'll have updates on the 8921, formerly 4931, which is the E-Textiles material standard, an update on the connectors guideline, IPC 8941, the work that's being done right now in reviewing some existing IPC standards content for a possible E-Textiles standard with printed electronics. Looking for volunteers to form a possible new subcommittee for test method validation. We'll talk about white papers, upcoming events, and as I said, we'll have an open discussion at the end. So very quickly, IPC standards shall be developed in accordance with applicable antitrust and competition laws, and meetings amongst competitors to develop IPC standards are to be conducted in accordance with these laws. It's a practical impossibility to delineate the permissible limits of discussion at any IPC meeting because so much is dependent upon the context in which any particular subject is to be raised. Nevertheless, a prudent rule which is to be followed at all IPC meetings is that no commercial topics be acted upon or even considered. To avoid these sensitive areas, there should never be a discussion on the points you see below. We've never run into any problems with this thus far with our IPC meetings with this committee, but it's good to know. So to lead off, we're going to have an update on the first standard that this committee undertook. And this is an activity that's been going on for a little bit over a year now. And that's the renamed IPC 8921 or redesignated IPC 8921. Both co-chairs, Stephanie Rogers and Diana Wyman, I believe, are on the call today. So Stephanie and Diana, if you want to hop off mute, and you can feel free to jump in to discuss what's been going on with the standard. But as you can see, right now we're at 112 participants. I think that number's actually ticked up, or it will tick up following some recent outreach that we did both through the IPC E-Textiles event and then a presentation that I gave last week in Taiwan. But the group is still planning for a December of next year publication for the standard, so that is still on track. So over the last year or so, a smaller group within the full subcommittee, which we call an A-team, has been meeting regularly to work on the actual content of the standard to build for full subcommittee review a comprehensive working draft. And this group meets primarily on web meetings. In fact, we've only had 2 meetings that I would consider to be face-to-face. One was earlier this year in San Diego at IPC Apex Expo, where we also invited some newcomers in to provide their input into things. And then the 8 team itself had a full-day working session a few weeks ago in Chicago following the IPC E-Textiles 2018 workshop. What this group has been doing, they've been working on the classification system for E-Textiles, conductive fibers, conductive yarns, and wires. They composed a list of functional characteristics to be tested. We'll share some of those characteristics in a slide in a bit, but basically those characteristics would comprise the meat of the standard. The list that the subcommittee, or not the subcommittee, but the A team has developed came from feedback from a survey that we did back in early 2017, as well as just some of the knowledge from within the A team. Just so everybody is clear, the list and the characteristics that are put into the draft should not be considered to be the be-all to end-all. There will be opportunities during the review and commenting cycles to add additional characteristics. Maybe to, if there's a characteristic that doesn't belong, that can be considered as well. So it's not like this group is writing a document that just needs to be rubber stamped. They're really putting in the legwork for the full subcommittee, so you do have a document that really is worthy of comprehensive review and comment. And that document we still have on target for a spring of 2019 completion. So that means that between the document being submitted to the full subcommittee for review in spring through December, we'll have that 6 to 7 month period to hash out comments and get the document into a form that would pass industry consensus ballot. So, important change that happened. So during the brainstorming, we did a brainstorming session prior to the IPC E-Textiles workshop in Chicago. We had about 30 to 33 people in the room, and we showed them just kind of what the group has been up to. And you'll see that in a bit. There's nothing that is like we're keeping anything behind a curtain with anybody. But what that group felt was that the document was just too far encompassing. It trying to cover so many different E-Textiles materials. And so we put it to a vote at the brainstorming session to say, all right, so what should we focus on, or at least propose to the A team to focus on? And the proposal was to limit the scope of the document to knitted and woven E-Textiles. The feeling was that of all of the E-Textiles types that we were trying to cram into the standard, these two were the most similar to where we could do a standard that would cover both of these E-Textiles types. And so the proposal went to the A team at their full day working meeting 2 days later, and there was a unanimous vote to make the change. So the title of the document, I'll skip back 2 slides because it's actually right there, is now Requirements for Woven and Knitted Electronic Textiles Integrated with Conductive Fibers, Conductive Yarns, and/or Wires. So the characteristics that we're covering that we will have for the document will now be focused entirely on that. I think there really shouldn't be too many changes there, or that will come out of the A team's work and then the full subcommittee's comments. But the feeling now, and the sense was almost a feeling and I'll let Stephanie jump in because Stephanie was at the meeting, was almost a sense of relief within the A team, and a sense of now, okay, it's clear. We've got a really clear direction on where we're moving forward with the standard. So as a sidebar to that, those other E-Textiles materials types that were listed in the original document, which many people would have if you've seen the Section 1 draft that was distributed late last year. Those can still be up for consideration. If a group comes together and says we want to develop some sort of a standard similar to IPC 8921 for non-woven materials or for braided, we can give them this document and say, here, you have a starting point. Form a group and start putting it together. So it's not like we're not going to even consider those materials, but really just to have this document more focused will enable the subcommittee to have a document that could be published in what the A team feels would be much quicker fashion. So Stephanie, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn the next few slides over to you, because this kind of gets into the meat of the matter regarding the things that we're covering in the document.
Sure, sounds great. Welcome, everyone. So Chris, your screen is slightly offset, and I'm going to refer to make sure I get everything. But the classifications has been a big part of the topic of the E-Textile standard. And so from the beginning, identifying conductive and non-conductive fibers is a very important part of the initial classification. And so in non-conductive, identifying the synthetic or man-made, and then the natural or cellulosic type materials. And then on the conductive side, subcategories of the various conductive materials, including metals, ceramics, polymer versions, and carbon. Additionally, yarn characteristics might be identified, and then yarn and fiber selected from any of those classifications previously. So you're basically building on the type of polymer. You're building on how that polymer is introduced into a yarn form through the filament, staple, or ply, or twist characteristics, and potentially using textile terminology to identify a yarn numbering system. So we've also identified different categories for wires and cables, and either the test types or the material properties that you might consider in those classifications. You can see how gauge, for example, is used in both industries. Gauge is also a terminology that's used to describe various textile equipment and the coarse or fineness of an overall textile structure. So we'll be getting into definitions. And then getting into the building of the structure itself through woven techniques, where you would suggest a potential weave pattern, and then also bringing in your fibers and yarns or wires classification types. Again, you're building somewhat of what we call a tech pack, or a pre-specification document with these classifications. Similarly, in knitted textiles, certain types of classifications you can use to describe the knit. And within this, we mentioned the composition of either. You need to identify the composition of the different fiber types. It's actually a labeling law. For the finished garment or component. And then some of the key performance characteristics of the finished e-textile product. From material requirement perspectives, electrical requirements, mechanical requirements, some surface requirements, and then environmental requirements. We've been able to identify some industry test methods through the collection of all of these classifications. And so here's a short list of some of the characteristics and their proposed test methods. Not surprising that AATCC and ASTM have some of the forefront of specifications. Potentially automotive and aviation and military may also lend application into this area.
Thanks, Steph. So As if for any of the people who have been on any of the past reporting sessions, you probably saw some similar things, especially between the last slides, between the characteristics and the test methods. And those are just really, I would say, boiled down lists. We just tried to get something where we could show what the document is covering. What the A team is doing now is they're taking some similar or some language or what we call, I'm putting air quotes up, kind of standards language that they can build around those characteristics and those test methods to come up with what would be the test requirement, and what would be the data point that would need to be reported. It's important to note that this document is not going to be a reliability. There's not going to be pass-fail criteria into this standard. So what you're going to see over within between now and or at least by spring, but we'll have another reporting session between now and then, will be how this is going to look. So we're not going to just suddenly dump, we don't know how many pages this document would be, but a pretty sizable document on everybody and say, here, digest this now. We're going to keep people up to speed on what we're doing. So when you see the final product that would be available for comment, it's not just going to be something that's going to catch you off guard. So in moving forward with this group's work, they're going to continue web meetings over the next 2 months, and then we're going to do a 2-day working meeting in Massachusetts in December. And we're really just trying to keep the momentum going in building out the content of the document. We're also going to ensure that the comments that we received from the Section 1 call for comments, which took place right before Apex of earlier this year, that all of those comments have been resolved or responded to. I would imagine that a large number of them are going to be overcome by events due to changes in the scope, but still we want to be sure that we resolve all those comments. And as I said, the plan, and I think that the group is on target for this, is to have a working draft for full subcommittee review and comment by spring. So don't want to put an exact month on it yet. We'll have a better idea on the availability sometime following the working meeting coming up in December. So another document that is going through the final approval processes, and I apologize to the subcommittee that we're forming around this on that, but we've had IPC has been going through some, I would say, high-level procedural changes on the standards management side of things from the volunteer aspect, and forming a different approach to what IPC had done in the past for getting projects approved. So this project I anticipate being officially approved within the next 30 days or so. There's no problems or issues with the standard. We just had to wait for a new group to form that approves projects. So even in the meantime, we've gathered content and topic ideas from people because there is interest in this standard, and we do have a fairly lengthy, and by lengthy I mean it's, I believe, 20 to 30 page table of contents. Now that's a draft table of contents that the group, whatever group is officially formed for this, is going to have to go through and to figure out exactly what approach this document should take. But for those who are not familiar with what we're doing with this, so this is going to be an industry guideline. By guideline, what that means is that there really are no requirements. You don't have you must or you shall. You're not going to be required you're not going to have any sort of pass-fail criteria, things of that nature. But it's going to provide some some common understanding on some things that this committee feels are kind of roadblocks for broader implementation of e-textiles, and that's with how to connect something, and if you connected, what tests you should do, how the connections will differ between the e-textile material that you would choose or the end product application. And so this is a way to help users and manufacturers to work together to make those best decisions. So the connections that you see that we have listed here, and this is just the starting point, would be like data USB, power, heat transfer, a combination. Some of the connection methods, and by some I mean we can only list a couple here because the connection methods that are in the draft table of contents is pretty extensive. But basically the end goal will be to have a document that would reduce time to market and hopefully would lower costs, because there would be an understanding through some sort of an industry standard as far as which tests really do you need to do, what's the best sort of connection type for a product and things of that nature. And so this way, it would help to also accelerate innovation for these product types. So with this document, and I'm going to go back and show the leader slide. And you see Connie Huffa. Maybe a lot of you know Connie with Fab Designs, and Mary Alice Gill with Jable Clothing Plus. But these chairs are really going to be looking for a lot of input and a lot of content from industry. So you see right now we have 53 participants. These are people who have joined the subcommittee that we've kind of formed. It's a de facto subcommittee right now, but this is with any of the other documents that we're discussing today are open for anybody to participate. But with this document in particular, I think what we'd like to do is to start off with a large group, and really try to get a lot of people who would be interested in really actively participating. There is, as I said, a very lengthy table of contents that's in draft form right now. But what this is going to come down to is going to be who is going to belly up to the bar to provide content. Because it's the content that we'll need to actually create the guideline. So this document also will be on a 3-year cycle. So I think we put down sometime in summer 2021 to have this completed. But it would be nice to have something out sooner than that. So even as this group is developing its standard, if it feels like, listen, we have so much here that we're looking to cover, maybe we can hone this down to a couple of application areas or one application area, or split the document up into application areas. We could do that. But for right now, it's a matter of getting the interested parties on board who not only would just be interested in reviewing the document for comment, but we need active participants who are actually going to build out the content for it. So over summer, and this is getting into another project that is on the very near horizon, which now we found could possibly be several projects. So IPC, our Printed Electronics Committee, published a design standard, and this gives design rules for printed electronics on flexible materials. And what I did was over summer, send a note. If you're a member of this committee on any of the groups, you should have received a note just saying that we have this document. We would like to have some volunteers step forward to review it to see if there are ways to take some of the existing content, theories, whatever, and build some sort of a design standard for printing on textiles. And so we got some really good feedback, and we sent out a meeting invitation. It was an open meeting that we held in Chicago. Again, this was immediately following the IPC E-Textiles event. And for that group, just to kind of get into a room together and review the feedback that came in, look at the document again, and try to come up with some what's a planned approach or direction for this sort of a project. And so the takeaways from this were that there needs to be more debate on the issue, because the printed electronics document, it was pretty cut and dry. You're talking about printing onto a material that was meant for printing upon. I mean, it's some sort of a really non-porous, flat sort of surface. But what you're looking at is, if you're talking about fabrics or what this group called conformable sort of materials, you're looking at several different possibilities for what could actually constitute printing for a printed version of an e-textile. Yeah, that means, printing on something flat and heat transferring it over to the fabric, printing on the a fabric with some sort of a resin or coating applied to it, and so what the group really needs is that they're looking for additional volunteers to step forward. And what we'd like to do is to hold a series of web meetings to talk about how some sort of a committee could form, or several working groups could form, to address a standard or standards in this area. So with the goal that this group would be able to come back to the D70 committee leadership with a proposal on how best to approach this. And it could be, listen, we feel that we can do a standard, maybe not as much a standard, maybe this is going to be a guideline on how to design for doing something on a release sheet, something where you're going to do a hot press. But we did identify that here are some of the other areas where potentially there could be standards if a group comes forward. So if anybody is interested in being a part of this particular activity, you can contact me. We're going to, once we get some more people who would be interested in being a part of this sort of a group, we'll try to hold some web meetings, kind of like we're having today, but it'll be more of an open discussion, and just to kind of get some additional perspectives from people who were not able to make the face-to-face meeting in Chicago, and to be able to again report back to the committee on what is possible, what could really be done, what could be helpful to industry right now. I also put down as a bullet here that if needs be, and if we could get enough participation, we could do a face-to-face meeting as well. I know that from the printing side, at IPC Apex Expo, which is our annual trade show and committee meetings, we have our printed electronics committee has pretty strong participation there. So I could schedule a meeting room as long as there's availability for a group like this, but I'd want to be sure, if we're going to do that it's going to be some continuity as far as for the participation. I mean, I would hate to do a meeting where we have a group that's dedicated to this, it's doing things on web meetings, and then do a face-to-face and it's a completely different group, which could veer us off in a different direction. But again, as far as for the next steps for this, we could do primarily web meetings, but if there was a need or a want to do a face-to-face meeting, that could be arranged. So an action or a possible action that bubbled up out of both the brainstorming session and our IPC 8921 A-team meeting is, we keep talking about as a group the gaps in test methods, and also for validation of a decision by a group that would be developing an IPC standard, the validation of a test method that it wants to reference from beyond just the working group that's developing that document. So what I'm looking for would be anybody who would be interested in the formation of a subcommittee that would do this. Now, at this point, we're not looking for an active group that's developing standards or test methods, but this would be a group that, if that would look at the different test methods that are being conducted right now, and those that are valid, I guess, for E-Textiles applications, and those where they're being adapted. There could be an industry test method that wasn't really written with the intentions of being used for E-Textiles, but it's been not would say modified, but it's been adapted for those sorts of technologies. And this group would also, as a test method gap is identified, and by gap I mean we have in our standard, we have a characteristic that we want people to test for, but really there's no known industry test method for it. And then this subcommittee could say, okay, well, we will look at who possibly could develop this sort of a test method and how it would look, and which SDO would be assigned to it, or if it could be something that would be done by, say, a joint activity, say between IPC and AATCC. But again, this is not going to be an active standards developing group at this point. If a need arose for a test method and it was decided that the test method should be developed by an IPC committee or an IPC group, we would form a task group specific to that test method under the auspices of this subcommittee. I would also see from this team generating additional white papers. We had our first white paper that was published over summer, and that was from from a test laboratory within a university. And so we do know that there's a lot of work that's happening at the laboratory level, and so perhaps there's some things that would be non-commercial or that would be non-proprietary that somebody from within the committee would like to write about. Then this is something that we could publish through IPC. I could see this group also perhaps from time to time doing a webinar for the E-Textiles community on a particular testing topic. So this would be a group that would be that would have some activity to it. It wouldn't be as regularly active at this point as, say, our IPC 8921A team, where they're meeting every other week or so for developing a document. So if there's anybody on this group or anybody who's watching this webinar who is interested in this, you can send me an email, and as I get enough interest, I will circle back to Stephanie, who is our committee chair, and say, listen, we have this group of people who's interested in forming this subcommittee. Let's work on giving developing a scope and a purpose and some high level sort of activity for them, and let them kind of get off and get rolling. So as I mentioned, there was the white paper that was published over summer. This was by Gemtex Labs in France, and it provides a perspective on washability of E-textile structures for silver-coated yarn. So the goal of this white paper is to actually there's several of them. One is to provide some sort of education to industry on these technologies. We want to generate other white papers. As anybody who's developed standards knows, the process for developing a standard is not fast. We speed it as much as we possibly can, but you're looking at a months to years long process. So in the meantime, you've got people who are kind of waiting on the sidelines for something to digest. And so white papers would provide that. So we're looking for industry to provide topics for white papers that they would like to write. And really there's no limit to it. You just make the proposal, give us a 1 to 2 paragraph abstract or description on what you would like to write about, how it would help industry through education, and then you can send that my way. And our process right now, and this worked really well for this white paper, the committee chair looks at the topic. It looks at the summary, and we'll, contact the author and say, listen, this is good. I have some ideas for ways that, you can approach this. And then once you submit a draft, we form a group, and so we can have consensus that would be applicable to that topic. We feel would provide strong feedback. And the process worked really well. We had really good comments that came back from people on the review team, and the authors were more than open to making the changes, and we were able to get that document spun around in a couple of months. So we want to continue to do things like this. For a third sort of approach for the white papers, especially if we're talking about washability, reliability, is we're also trying to gather as much information as possible on this topic, because this is one area where this industry is really going to have to come to some baseline standards and reliability understanding. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to pick some sort of a reliability threshold or limit for a white paper, but what we'll see through these white papers and through ongoing discussion that would come from them would be some baselines to kind of get the discussion going. So again, the white paper that was published over summer is available from the bookstore. You see the designation number there. If you go to the IPC bookstore, you can search on that and find it. And if you have any topic ideas for white papers, again, you'll see the contact information for Stephanie and me on the last slide. Please send your ideas our way. We're I don't think that there really would be at this point a bad idea, but we just need ideas to review. So a couple of events that are coming up that would be of interest to this community. So IPC and AATCC, we've been working closely together, one on the development of the standard and also just in regular discussions on things. So forming a really good relationship there. And AATC has been kind enough to allow IPC with them to host a joint session the day before their fall committee meetings coming up in Raleigh, North Carolina. So the session would be another opportunity for brainstorming on different sort of standards topics. I mean, if there's something that is a pressing need, we want industry to tell us about it, because the staff from both groups will present the ideas back to the committee leadership for both groups to see if there's a way to generate some of those ideas into any new projects. As you see what happened with the brainstorming session that we did in Chicago, that resulted in a really positive change for the IPC 8921 standard. We're also looking at the formation of a subcommittee for testing. So things come out of these brainstorming sessions. I mean, sessions like today, there's a lot of talking out because we're trying to report things, but these brainstorming sessions really are a way for industry to talk to each other and to the staff from the groups. Also, as part of this, AATCC is going to have this event at their tech center. Diana, you're on the line, so if you want to jump in on this, feel free. But there's going to be some hands-on access to materials and test equipment. So it's going to be a really unique, sort of fun event. It's a great way to kick off the committee meetings there in Raleigh. The session and the committee meetings are open to all. So if you're on the IPC side, if you've been involved with IPC committees and haven't been to anything AATCC related, we hope to see you there. I plan to be there for the meetings the following day, including RA111, which is working on specific E-Textiles things. But Diana, was there anything further to that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that was a good plug. I will just say on the hands-on part, we're not planning necessarily a specific demonstration. We're just going to have a variety of different materials. I think in a lot of cases, people just don't realize how different things are, and we can look at some of the challenges of measuring them and evaluating them and classifying them and all of that. If you have materials you'd like to bring, and we can take some measurements, or if you have equipment and you'd like to test it on the materials, we can kind of go with who's here and what their interests are. But the point is, we'll have some hands-on stuff, and so if you haven't had a chance to really do this is a great opportunity. Plus, like Chris said, just a good opportunity to get with other people who are interested in this area and share ideas and maybe come up with the next great thing.
Great. And then you see right here, there's a link on the right, URL there for looking at the list of meetings that will take place and also to register. So again, hope to see everybody there. I'd like to see a good turnout for that. Want to thank Stephanie for coming up in a pinch. So IPC was asked to do a technology buzz session during the IPC Apex Expo trade show in January. So Stephanie has come up with a topic, what you see here, which is on E-Textiles being the fourth industrial revolution. And this will be a free buzz session. So free, that means that if you're registered for Apex Expo, whether you register as an exhibitor, not an exhibitor, but register for the exhibits only, or if you register for the committee meetings only, or if you register for any aspect of the full technical conference, this is something that is an additional freebie for people to attend. So you see the description there. I think this is going to be a fun panel event, and Stephanie is mulling who to have on this panel, and based on some of the talks that she and I had last week, I think it's going to be a pretty interesting cross-section. But what we're looking for is for people to send their questions about the topic. I mean, I wouldn't think that no questions off limits at this point, but if you could send it to etextiles@ipc.org, that's a general email box that we set up for people to provide input, questions, or anything else about E-Textiles. We will get all those questions over to Stephanie for her to pull together for developing everything for the panel. You see the registration info and not info, but the registration website for Apex Expo right there. So I would ask people to go in and register. If you are from the textile side, look at the list of committee meetings and the list of topics for the technical sessions. You're going to see a lot of things that could be familiar to you, but not entirely within your wheelhouse. But Apex Expo is, one of the largest electronics trade shows worldwide. So this is again why we're holding this buzz session at Apex this coming year. So before we get into the open discussion, just wanted to reiterate some things, on how anybody can participate today. So even though the IPC 8921 group is kind of a closed A team, there are other opportunities for anybody on the committee or anybody in industry to participate as they wish. So, as I said, for the connectors guideline, we're going to look for a lot of help from industry on this. This document could be a significant undertaking, and I foresee there being the need for a lot of heavy lifting as far as for content and photos and data tables and anything else that could comprise a standard, because we're really starting with a blank slate aside from the table of contents. So that one's going to need a lot of industry participation. On the proposal for the printed design standard, if you're interested in being on that group, email me. You can, and like I said, I'm trying to pull together some additional bodies from, in addition to who was at the working meeting in Chicago, and I'll send out, for those who are on the initial sort of ad hoc group for this, you've been receiving emails from me in the past. I'm going to send out another notification to everybody in that group as well, so you won't be left out. But we really want to form a strong group that can meet kind of regularly over the next few months to hash out how we can approach a design standard. For the test method validation subcommittee, again, if you're with a test laboratory, if you are on the reliability side and you have an interest in testing, if you participate on ASTM or AATCC groups, we would like to have you on a potential subcommittee for this. So if this is something that's of interest to you, again, let me know. As I said earlier, I don't think that this is going to be a heavy amount of work sort of group right now. It's going to be more of a strategic sort of guru sort of group at this point. But again, it's something to where there's an opportunity to participate. If you have a topic you'd like to cover in a white paper, you don't need to send us a full white paper draft at this point. Just send a title or a roundabout title and a brief abstract, 2 to 3 paragraphs on what you'd like to cover and how it could benefit industry. Again, you could send that to me, you could send it to Stephanie directly as well, but I mean, we can't know what you have unless you share it with us. If you think that there is a need for a new standard, we need to know what that would be.
Hey, Emil. This is Mary Johnson.
Hey, Mary, could you go on mute?
I don't think we've met before. I'm the Senior Scientific Communications Manager for Fabricare.
Sorry about that. So anyhow, if there is a standards topic that you think there's a need for, let us know. If there's a guideline, a guideline is where we maybe don't have enough information or data behind setting any sort of requirements, or maybe there's not a need to put requirements on it, but just more of a how-to and best practices document. Requirement specifications is really like what we're getting into with the 8921 document. It's just, here is a characteristic, this is the test you shall perform, and then report the data. It could get beyond that, but it's just one example of a specification. For test methods, if there is a need for an industry test method, we want to know about it. Any sort of ideas like that would potentially go to the test method validation subcommittee. And with anything that you have as far as for an idea for a standard, just email me. It's not, we don't let people just kind of hang on the vine with an idea that they have. I actually have 2 standards topics that came my way as a result of a presentation last week, and I'm working with that person directly to try to get the best amount of information out of the person to where I can provide first the committee leadership with the direction, and then as long as the committee leadership says A-OK, that we can get that through the actual IPC approval process. So with that, I think we can open up the phone line, so to speak. I really appreciate everybody coming on the call today. I see right now we're 34 people who are on. Just one reminder for those who came on late, we do want to have a roster of the attendees for today because we are still considering this to be a committee meeting. So if you can email me, again, my email address is right there. If you are not looking at the slide deck, and I did attach the slide deck in PDF form to the meeting announcement, it's at the end of the slide deck, but you can also look at my email address comes up in the meeting invitation for today. If you're having trouble with the spelling of my name, email etextiles@ipc.org. It'll come directly to me. Stephanie, is there anything that you wanted to jump in on before we let people kind of have at us?
No, Chris, it was a comprehensive overview, and I hope everyone can recognize the progress and effort and to join in, and then I welcome all the comments and feedback.
So if you do have something you want to say, please feel free to speak up. Just if you do, because we don't really recognize voices, just kind of state your name, your company, and then we're here to listen and respond.
Hey, Chris, it's Len Allison with Engineered Material Systems.
Hey, Len.
And on your slide deck, it had mentioned Argotech, but that's one of those companies that got bought. They're part of SWM International now, just in case you want to update that.
Okay.
But the other 2 are okay.
Cool. And just so everybody knows, Len was our de facto sort of thrown into the mix leader on the meeting in Chicago from a couple weeks ago on the design standard. Len, as long as you're here, is there anything beyond what I said on that slide that you wanted to share with people, or did I capture everything pretty well?
I'm going over it again. Yeah, no, I think you did a good job with that. The only thing I have is that one name. but everybody gets bought and sold these days, it seems, right? So that's easy enough to have some dated information. I'm just reading this here. Yeah, that's pretty much correct. Yeah, everything you got on there is pretty much what we were trying to say. And for that, the group needs to, I know we're trying to focus, but it still has to do with getting printable electronics into textiles. And so for that, there's either printing onto some sort of a flat film and then transferring, or printing conductive and plastisol type of inks and then transferring that over too. So there's several different ways to do that. There's a lot of different vendors all cooperating and collaborating on this and coming up with some solutions for the industry that each one has advantages and disadvantages, and it's good to have everybody involved.
Great. Any other questions or comments or feedback from anybody else on the call? I think I have one question, because this is a quiet call, and that's totally fine. But was anybody in objection to the decision that was made to tighten the scope of IPC 8921? All right. Well, unless...
Tell me again, 8921 is what exactly? I always get mixed up on the numbers.
Sure. I'm sorry. I should have said that. So 8921 is the E-Textiles material standard that when the group first started it covered woven, non-woven, knitted, braided, printed, any number of E-Textiles of types. And what the A team decided to do and voted on was to limit the scope, not change in the direction of the standard really. So it's not becoming an entirely new standard, but it's limiting the scope to cover just woven and knitted E-Textiles.
Now I remember. Thank you.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for everybody for coming on the call today. If there's anything that comes up, anything that hits your mind after this presentation, please don't hesitate to send an email to me. You can also email Stephanie. We want to be sure that we're meeting the needs of this group, but also we want everybody to be rest assured that you're not being left behind, that we're not doing things in a silo. So again, while the A team is working on that IPC 8921 woven and knitted document, there's a lot of other things that you can do if you have interest, and these can be small tasks up to forming your own a new working group to work on a standard. There really is no limit, really, within the standards perspective to what you can do, or at least what you can propose. So with that, I think that we will close today's reporting session. We will be in touch between the first week of December and the end of this calendar year with a time for another one of these discussions. This would be following the 2-day working meeting for the IPC 8921 document, and this will give some time for other groups working on looking at the printed document and a possible test methods group or test validation group to form up. So with that, we're going to close today's call, and I thank everybody again for your time and participation. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.